Imagine opening the morning newspaper and discovering a letter from a killer, not a warning from the police, not a witness statement, a letter written by the murderer himself. In it, he claimed responsibility for a series of brutal attacks. He included details only the killer could have known. He demanded that newspapers publish a coded message, and he signed it with a strange symbol, a symbol that would become one of the most infamous icons in American criminal history. He called himself Zodiac. For years, he terrorized communities, taunted investigators, and turned one of the largest manhunts in the country into a public spectacle. Detectives chased leads, experts analyzed evidence, suspects emerged and faded away. Yet decades later, one question remains unanswered. Who was the Zodiac Killer? This is the story of the murderer who wanted the world to know his name, but never revealed his own. On a cold December night in 1968, two young people drove to a secluded area near Benicia, California. It was the kind of place where couples often went for privacy. The night seemed ordinary. There was no reason to believe they were in danger. Then a car approached. What happened next would become the beginning of one of the most famous unsolved criminal cases in history. The attack shocked investigators and devastated the local community. At first, it appeared to be an isolated crime, tragic but not unusual enough to suggest a larger pattern. Detectives collected evidence and searched for leads. But there were few clues, no clear suspect, no obvious motive, and no indication that the person responsible would strike again. Yet hundreds of miles away, a mystery was already beginning to take shape, because this would not be the last attack. 7 months later, another attack would convince investigators that they were dealing with something far more dangerous than a single criminal act. In July 1969, another young couple was attacked in a remote location. The similarities quickly drew attention. Again, the victims had been targeted in an isolated area. Again, the attacker seemed to vanish without a trace. But this time, something happened that changed the case forever. A man contacted authorities and claimed responsibility. He didn't just confess. He provided details that had not been released to the public, details that strongly suggested he was the attacker. Investigators now faced a terrifying possibility. The attacks were connected, and the person responsible wanted credit. Yet even this was only the beginning. Within weeks, newspapers across Northern California would receive letters unlike anything they had seen before. The letters contained a symbol, a threat, and a challenge that would capture the attention of the entire nation. In the summer of 1969, the investigation took a shocking turn. Several newspapers received nearly identical letters from someone claiming responsibility for the attacks. The writer didn't simply confess. He demanded attention. He wanted his words printed for the public to see, and he included details about the crimes that convinced investigators the letters were likely genuine. For police, this changed everything. The killer was no longer hiding in silence. He was communicating directly with the world. Each letter was signed with a strange symbol, a circle crossed by vertical and horizontal lines. It looked simple, yet it would become one of the most recognizable symbols in criminal history. Along with the letters came something even more unusual, pieces of a coded message. The writer claimed the message contained information about his identity. Newspapers were instructed to publish the code. If they refused, he threatened further violence. Suddenly, the case was no longer confined to police files and crime scenes. It had become a public spectacle. Across California, people opened newspapers and stared at the mysterious symbols. Ordinary citizens attempted to solve the code. Amateur investigators joined the hunt. The media covered every development, and for the first time, the killer gave himself a name: Zodiac. The name transformed the case. No longer was investigators' attention focused on an unknown attacker. They were now searching for a criminal who had created a public identity. A criminal who seemed to enjoy the attention. A criminal who wanted the world to remember him. But there was one problem. Despite all the publicity, nobody knew who he was. And the coded message only deepened the mystery. Then, against all odds, two ordinary citizens managed to crack part of the code. What they discovered raised even more questions than answers. The challenge fascinated the public. Hidden within the symbols was a message waiting to be decoded. Law enforcement agencies examined it. Experts studied it. Newspapers discussed it. Yet the breakthrough came from an unexpected source, not from detectives, not from intelligence agencies, but from ordinary people determined to solve the puzzle. Working carefully through the symbols, they managed to decode a large portion of the message. The public eagerly waited to learn what secret the Zodiac Killer had hidden. Many expected a confession, a motive, perhaps even a name. Instead, the message offered something far more unsettling. The writer spoke about himself, but he did not reveal his identity. The code provided clues to his thinking, yet it failed to answer the question investigators wanted solved most. Who was he? The frustration was enormous. The killer had captured public attention once again, while revealing almost nothing useful. And that pattern would continue. More letters followed, more messages, more claims. Some appeared genuine, others sparked debate among investigators. Every communication generated headlines. Every communication renewed public fear. Yet, despite the growing stack of evidence, detectives remained trapped in the same position. They knew more about the Zodiac Killer than ever before, but they still didn't know his name. As months turned into years, attention began shifting toward a new question. If the killer was communicating so often, could his letters reveal who he really was? Investigators started looking closely at the people who might fit the profile, and soon several suspects would emerge. Some seemed convincing, others seemed unlikely, yet none would provide a definitive answer. Decades later, people still argue about the same question. Was one of these suspects the Zodiac Killer? Or was the real killer someone nobody ever suspected? As the years passed, investigators collected an enormous amount of evidence. Witness statements, physical descriptions, handwriting samples, letters, ciphers, forensic evidence, and countless tips from the public. Yet, despite all of it, the identity of the Zodiac Killer remained unknown. The lack of answers created a vacuum. And into that vacuum came theories, lots of them. Over the decades, dozens of names were connected to the case. Some were suggested by amateur investigators. Others attracted serious attention from law enforcement. One suspect in particular became the focus of enormous public interest. He appeared to match certain aspects of the descriptions. His background raised questions, and several circumstances seemed suspicious. For many people following the case, he looked like a strong possibility. Yet as investigators examined the evidence more closely, problems emerged. Certain details didn't align. Some pieces of evidence pointed in one direction, others pointed somewhere else entirely. The deeper authorities looked, the harder it became to reach a definitive conclusion. And this pattern repeated itself again and again. A suspect would emerge, theories would spread, evidence would be analyzed, then doubts would appear. No matter how promising a lead seemed, it always stopped short of proving the case. Years turned into decades. New investigators joined the effort. Advances in forensic science created fresh opportunities. Old evidence was re-examined. New theories emerged. Yet the central mystery refused to disappear. The Zodiac Killer remained a ghost, known through letters, symbols, and crimes, but never conclusively identified. For investigators, it was one of the most frustrating aspects of the entire case. There were suspects, there were theories, there was evidence, but there was never enough to remove all reasonable doubt. And that raised an uncomfortable possibility. What if the reason the Zodiac was never caught wasn't because investigators failed? What if the case itself was extraordinarily difficult to solve? To understand why the mystery endured for so long, we need to look at the obstacles facing detectives during one of the most complex investigations in American criminal history. Looking back from the modern era, it's tempting to ask a simple question. Why didn't investigators catch him? After all, the Zodiac Killer communicated with newspapers, sent letters, mailed ciphers, claimed responsibility for crimes. It seems like there should have been enough evidence to identify him. But criminal investigations in the late 1960s and early 1970s were very different from those of today. Many of the forensic tools modern investigators rely upon either did not exist or were far less advanced. DNA analysis was not available in the way people know it today. Digital databases did not exist. Surveillance technology was limited. Information sharing between agencies was often slower and more complicated. Investigators worked with the tools they had, and despite their efforts, the case presented challenge after challenge. Witness descriptions varied. Physical evidence was limited. Some crime scenes produced clues. Others produced very little. Leads flooded into police departments. Thousands of tips had to be evaluated. Most led nowhere. Every promising suspect required time and resources to investigate. Meanwhile, public attention continued growing. Newspapers covered every development. The case became one of the most talked about mysteries in the country. That publicity helped generate information, but it also created confusion. Rumors spread. False leads multiplied. Speculation became difficult to separate from fact. And all the while, the person responsible remained unidentified. As the years passed, active investigations continued. Detectives revisited evidence. New technologies were applied to old materials. Fresh theories emerged, yet the mystery endured. More than half a century later, the Zodiac Killer remains one of the most famous unsolved criminal cases in history. Not because investigators stopped trying, but because every answer seemed to create another question. Yet perhaps the most remarkable part of the story isn't that the Zodiac Killer was never caught. It's that decades later, people are still trying to find him. Most criminal investigations eventually reach a conclusion. A suspect is identified, a trial takes place, a verdict is delivered. The story, for better or worse, comes to an end. But the Zodiac Killer case never followed that path. Decades have passed since the letters first appeared. Decades have passed since investigators began searching for the person behind the symbol. Yet the mystery remains. New generations continue to discover the case. Books have been written about it. Documentaries have examined it. Researchers have spent years studying every detail. Amateur investigators have analyzed letters, ciphers, witness accounts, and police reports. Entire communities have formed around one simple question: who was the Zodiac Killer? Part of the fascination comes from the unanswered nature of the case. Human beings are naturally drawn to mysteries. We want explanations. We want conclusions. We want the missing piece that makes everything fit together. The Zodiac case refuses to provide that piece. Every theory seems to raise new questions. Every suspect leaves room for doubt. Every breakthrough appears to reveal another dead end. And perhaps that is why the story continues to endure. The mystery remains unfinished. It exists in a strange place between history and uncertainty, a puzzle whose final piece may never be found. Yet there is another reason people continue talking about the Zodiac Killer. The case serves as a reminder that not every mystery is solved. Modern audiences often expect technology to provide answers. DNA, databases, digital records, advanced forensic science. We have become accustomed to seeing mysteries resolved, but some cases originated in a different era, an era where evidence could be lost, leads could disappear, and opportunities could slip away forever. The Zodiac investigation became one of those cases, a race against time in which time ultimately gained the advantage. The years passed, witnesses aged, memories faded, evidence deteriorated, and the mystery grew deeper. Today, the Zodiac Killer remains one of the most famous unidentified criminals in history. A figure known around the world, not because anyone knows who he was, but because nobody does. More than 50 years later, investigators, researchers, and ordinary citizens are still searching for answers, still examining evidence, still debating suspects, still hoping that one day the mystery will finally be solved. Perhaps it will, perhaps it won't. But until that day comes, one question continues to echo through one of the most famous criminal investigations ever conducted. Who was the Zodiac Killer? The Zodiac Killer wanted attention. He wanted to be remembered. He wanted the world to know his symbol. In that respect, he succeeded. But despite all the letters, all the ciphers, all the investigations, and all the theories, the one thing he never revealed was the answer investigators wanted most: his identity. And that is why the mystery endures.